capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number, or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I
It's
know,
really hard.
and maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. So tonight we are continuing on in Alexander Berkman's What is Communist Anarchism, which has also been known by somehow What is Anarcho-Communism, the ABC of Anarchism, and I think there might have even been one more that it went by. But it went by several different titles. It's all the same book, though. And we are pretty far into it. We're in the second half of chapter 22, and we're getting into the real meat and potato stuff. So tonight is will anarcho-communism win, or communist anarchism, excuse me, win, or not will it win, or just is it, what is it, will it work, excuse me. So that's the title of the chapter tonight. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and if you want to support me even more to make this more than just a not even really a part-time thing, more than just a hobby. If you'd like to see this every day, even, and the best way to do that is to support me on Patreon at patreon.com/bread_theory. And you can help out there, not give any of your money to Bezos in the process. You can always support me on Twitch. That's always appreciated as well. So if that's the most comfortable way to do it, go ahead. But either way, tonight, or right now, let's start up the audiobook. Oh, let's get on that. Let me adjust the closed captioning so that it's out of the way of everything. So we only got halfway through the chapter last time, which is, I kind of figured that. This is a longer chapter. And you know what? I'm not remembering exactly where we were at in terms of what the book was talking about. So maybe we'll back it up just a little bit here. And we'll start with this sentence here and see if that makes sense for us to then be able to continue on. As always, this is a learning space. So if you have questions, if you're not, if you're not feeling what he's talking about, if it's not making sense, don't hesitate to ask. Always here to help people understand what's going on. All right, and here we go.
Increased contentment and consequently greater efficiency of their workers. The principle is sound. Today, of course, it is being exploited for the sole purpose of bigger profits. But under anarchism, it would be applied not only for the sake of personal gain, but in the interests of the workers' health, for the lightening of labor. Our progress in mechanics is so great and continually advancing.
Okay. I remember now. So just to refresh everybody, what he's talking about is very true. In the current system, anytime there's a gain in automation, in mechanization of any kind, where does that gain go to? It doesn't lighten the worker's load, as he said. It doesn't make them work less hours. They end up being more productive by having the new machinery in place. So where does the extra profit go to? Obviously, it goes to whoever owns those machines. That's the way it works in capitalism. Uh, Capitalists will take profit from anything that they own. Uh, so, you know, a new automatic checkout machine goes in at the grocery store. That does not help at all the current checkout workers, the cashiers. It only fattens the pockets of whoever owns the store. Now, under anarchism, what he's talking about is instead everyone owns their own means of production. So if in that scenario, all the workers at that grocery store also own that grocery store and any sort of profits, and that could be monetary profits, that could be profits in terms of saving time and energy. Um, whatever it is, all the gains go to everybody because everybody's an owner. Um, so that right there should be a good reason for any worker to want to support, well, any sort of socialist conception that does away with capitalism. Any and pretty much any leftist theory, whether it is basic socialism, whether it is communism, whether it is anarchism. In theory, it does away with capitalist production so that the profits of any endeavor are shared amongst the people that are actually doing the work. That's just the basic dividing line between all leftist ideologies and everything on the right. It's does the profit go to the top or does it get shared amongst people that do work? If it's the latter, then that's a leftist system. So anarchy is included in that. Yeah. Um, all right. Well, actually, let's continue on, and we'll have some more things to say about it.
that the most hard toil could be eliminated by the use of modern machinery and labor saving devices. In many industries, such as coal mining, for instance, new safety and sanitary appliances are not introduced because of the master's indifference to the welfare of their employees and on account of the expenditure involved. But in a non-profit system, technical science would work exclusively with the aim of making labor safer, healthier, lighter, and more pleasant. But however light you make the work, 8 hours a day is no pleasure, objects your friend. You are perfectly right, but did you ever stop to consider why we have to work 8 hours a day? Do you know that not so long ago, people used to slave 12 and 14 hours, and that it is still the case in backward countries like China and India? It can be statistically proven that 3 hours of work a day, at most, is sufficient to feed, shelter, and clothe the world, and supply it not only with the necessities, but also with the modern comforts of life. The point is that not one man in 5 is today doing any productive work. The entire world is supported by a small minority of toilers. First of all, consider the amount of work done in present-day society that would become unnecessary under anarchist conditions. Take
I
the
see.
armies and navies of the world, and
So what he's saying is not only are only some people doing the actual labor, but if we used automation to the advantage of everybody, it wasn't just for the benefit of the few, we could do away with a lot of work altogether, and there just would be less need for it overall. We could still produce the same amount of stuff, even more stuff, to provide the basics of life and more. Um, but it would require a lot less toil.
think of how many millions of men would be released for useful and productive effort once war is abolished,
Well, that's
as
a good
would
point
be,
too.
of course, the case.
So it's not that he's saying that most people are not laborers or workers. It's just that the work that they do is kind of bullshit, and that holds true today. Um, Bullshit Jobs being a great book to check out on that subject by David Graeber. He estimates that about 40% of work could just be eliminated because it's serves no real purpose. And I'm inclined to believe that that might even be a small estimate because it was dependent on people self-reporting even. So if we actually took a look at it more scientifically, because it was, his study was not scientific. It was pretty informal, the survey. But I think if we took a scientific look, there'd probably be even more that we could do away with. We're not having useless bureaucracy that just goes to, uh, supporting owners and protecting their interests and managing their money and all this stuff. All that work could go away, and we could still produce the same stuff we do today.
Under anarchy. In every country today, labor supports the millions who contribute nothing to the welfare of the country, who create nothing, and perform no useful work whatever. Those millions are only consumers without being producers. In the United States, for instance, out of a population of 120 millions, there are less than 30 million workers, farmers included. A similar situation is the rule in every land. Is it any wonder that labor has to toil long hours since there are only 30 workers to every 120 persons?
That seems like a very low estimate to me. I wonder how he arrives at that. Only 30 million workers out of 120 million. I guess it really depends on how you're calculating who is a worker and who is not. But he's not given a citation there.
The large business classes, their clerks, assistants, agents, and commercial travelers, with the courts, with their judges, record keepers, bailiffs, etc., the legion of attorneys and with their staffs, the militia and police forces.
Okay, I'm starting to see the picture a little bit more. And sure, it can definitely be argued that when everyone's needs are met, there's much less crime, so there's therefore much less need for the legal system or the people that work in the legal system, much less need for lawyers, judges, police officers, militia, so on and so forth. So I'm starting to understand where he's getting that calculation from. But I don't think we can ever say that we need none of any of that stuff. In any system, there's going to be bad actors and people that, no matter what you do, will not fall into the standards set out by the rest of the community members. So you have to figure out what to do about them, and we can definitely do things much more humanely and ethically than they're being done right now. But that doesn't mean that we won't have to do anything about that. We can't just let people go around and hurt people as they please, because some people would, even if they don't have a material need to do so. But yeah, interesting way that he's looking at this.
The churches and monasteries, the charity institutions.
Oh, okay, so again, churches and monasteries are still going to be around, even if people are okay, or even well off. Religion is kind of one of those persistent things that yes, it's on the decline overall, but people that are out and out atheists at this point it was very low last time I looked it up. It was like 5-10%, something like that. So getting a system that is more equitable for everybody and that shares power more evenly does not then necessarily do away with any of these older institutions. It might mean that their charity work is less necessary. So there may be less people involved in church goings on, but they might just find a new cause instead. They might help out with, you know, they might use their network to enhance mutual aid networks. No, there's many things that they can do, but the idea that people are just going to stop believing altogether because they have their material needs met, I think is an overreach.
And poorhouses, the prisons with their wardens, officers, keepers, and the non-productive convict population, the army of advertisers and their helpers, whose business it is to persuade you to buy what you don't want or need, not to speak of the numerous elements that live luxuriously in entire idleness.
Good point there too. Without capitalism, there is much less of a need for advertisement. It would be more like message boards at most. Think of just like basically a Craigslist. We have under anarchist, um, voluntary sort of gift economy. It could just be like, we have such and such of this product available to whoever wants it, and then you'd say, "Oh, my business." I guess you'd still call it a business. My business needs it, this amount of it, and you can just kind of have people self-direct where all of their excess products and services go. And so you don't need as much advertising and whatnot. You just basically say, "Hey, this is what we got. Would you like it?" And things kind of work themselves out, um, one way or another. But yeah, a whole lot less need for advertising. And then all the idle rich who, in any age don't really do work, um, maybe hardly even direct work. um, yeah, definitely under this society, they would be more likely to actually do something.
All of these mount into the millions in every country. Now, if all those millions would apply themselves to useful labor, would the worker have to drudge 8 hours a day? If 30 men have to put in 8 hours to perform a certain task, how much less time would it take 120 men to accomplish the same thing? I don't want to have to burden you with statistics, but there are enough data to prove that less than 3 hours of daily physical effort would be sufficient to do the day's work.
And that was more or less Peter Kropotkin's calculation, speaking from a few decades earlier than Berkman, but still came to about the same conclusion. About 3 to 4 hours would be enough to provide the needs for everybody. And if you look at, just say, your own compensation, maybe this might be a good thought experiment for you. How many hours of work does it take to pay you for the day? So if you can calculate the gross amount that you are paid at your job every day, how many hours does it take to get to that point? Because all the work that you do after that point doesn't put any more money in your pockets. I mean, technically it does because of the way things are compensated, but you have produced enough stuff to pay yourself for the day. You've produced enough goods or services for your company to pay yourself. So then anything after that point all goes to your boss. Well, not necessarily your direct boss, but the owner, to be distributed to people like your boss and themselves, of course. So yeah, how many hours is it? It tends to be about half the day, So by noon, usually, depending on what time you start work, but by noon, most people, I would say, even have been productive enough to compensate themselves. So if we're not spending the rest of the day making money for somebody else, it seems to line up pretty well. That 3 or 4 hours, and that's all that's really needed.
Can you doubt that even the hardest toil would become a pleasure instead of the cursed slavery it is at present, if only 3 hours a day were required, and that under the most sanitary and hygienic conditions, and an atmosphere of brotherhood and respect for labor? But it is not difficult to foresee the day when even those short hours would be further reduced, for we are constantly improving our technical methods, and new labor-saving machinery is being invented all the time. Mechanical progress means less work and greater comforts, as you can see by comparing life in the United States with that in China or India. In the latter countries, they toil long hours to secure the barest necessities of existence, while in America, even the average laborer enjoys a much higher standard of living with fewer hours of work. The advance of science and invention signifies more leisure hours for the pursuits we love. I have sketched in large, broad outline the possibilities of life under a sensible system where profit is abolished. It is not necessary to go into the minute details of such a social condition. Sufficient has been said to show that communist anarchism means the greatest material welfare with a life of liberty for each and all. We can visualize the time when labor will have become a pleasant exercise, a joyous application of physical effort to the needs of the world. Men will then look back at our present day and wonder that work could ever have been slavery, and question the sanity of a generation that suffered less than 1/5 of its population to earn the bread for the rest by sweat of their brow, while those others idled and wasted their time, their health, and the people's wealth. They will wonder that the freest satisfaction of man's needs could not have been considered as anything but self-evident, or that people naturally seeking the same objects insisted on making life hard and miserable by mutual strife. They will refuse to believe that the whole existence of man was a continuous struggle for food in a world rich with luxuries, a struggle that left the great majority neither time nor strength for the highest quests of heart and mind. But will not life under anarchy, in economic and social equality, mean general leveling, you ask? No, my friend, quite the contrary, because equality does not mean equal amount, but equal opportunity. It does not mean, for instance, that if Smith needs 5 meals a day, Johnson also must have as many. If Johnson wants only 3 meals, while Smith requires 5, the quantity each consumes may be unequal, but both men have perfectly equal in the opportunity each has to consume as much as he needs, as much as his particular nature demands. Do not make the mistake of identifying equality in liberty with the forced equality of the convict camp. True anarchist equality implies freedom, not quantity. It does not mean that everyone must eat, drink, or wear the same things, do the same work, or live in the same manner. Far from it. They reverse, in fact. Individual needs and tastes differ, as appetites differ. It is equal opportunity to satisfy them that constitutes true equality.
I like that. Basically, that's just another way of restating from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. So not everyone has the same needs, not everyone has the same ability, but we all get enough to keep going. We all get enough to go for the sort of life that we want to have. So yeah, it's not the it's not the equality of outcome, in other words, that conservatives seem so upset with. There still is a spectrum of outcomes for any particular person, and some of it depends on what they put in. But no one can fall so far that they completely fall out of society and are at risk of, you know, succumbing to the elements, basically, or to hunger. So yeah, that's an important distinction, or important way of defining equality. It's equal opportunity, recognizing that you can only have equal opportunity if we're all starting from the same platform. So providing that platform of basic needs for everybody, and from that point forward, allowing people to choose how they put their you know, what they put their daily labor towards.
Far from leveling, such equality opens the door for the greatest possible variety of activity and development. For human character is diverse, and only the repression of its diversity results in leveling, in uniformity and sameness. Free opportunity of expression and acting out your individuality means development of natural dissimilarities and variations. It is said that no two blades of grass are alike. Much less so are human beings. In the whole wide world, no two persons are exactly similar, even in physical appearance. Still more dissimilar are they in their physiological, mental, and psychical makeup. Yet, in spite of this diversity and 1,001 differentiations of character, we compel people to be alike today. Our life habits, our behavior and manners, even our thoughts and feelings are pressed into a uniform mold and fashioned into sameness. The spirit of authority, law, written and unwritten, tradition and custom force us into a common groove and make of man a will-less automaton without independence or individuality. This moral and intellectual bondage is more compelling than any physical coercion, more devastating to our manhood and development. All of us are its victims, and only the exceptionally strong succeed in breaking its chains, and then only partly. The authority of the past and of the present dictates not only our behavior, but dominates our very minds and souls.
Uh, Before we get too far beyond the point, he was talking about how the modern system makes us all the same, basically, and that is still true today. There's a reason that they call the working class the masses. It's because from the point of view of the owner class, we're basically interchangeable parts. We might as well be living machinery that they also have to begrudgingly provide, um, insurance for and a paycheck to, and these sorts of things. But otherwise, we're all the same to them. And we are all equally beholden to the whims of the world by reason of not having means to rise above where we're at. So we don't have a lot of choice about where we live, what jobs we do, how we dress, a lot of the different ways that people can express themselves and individuate themselves. Those choices are not open to the working class nearly as much as they are to the owner class. So that's another important point to point out, because so often leftist societies are conceived of as for whatever reason drab and boring and all the same, all equally poor. I think a lot of it is just projection. When they constantly mock Soviet blocs of the former Soviet nations as being just gray and without form and brutal and all this stuff. Well, at the same time, the sort of stuff that capitalism produces is just as interchangeable. Like I do package delivery for my day job in the winter, and I work mostly in the suburbs. And you really couldn't tell if I were to take a photo from any point of my day, even when I'm going to, you know, strip malls and stuff like that. You couldn't tell if this was Ohio or Maryland, um, California. Maybe you'd be able to guess by the brands of stores. But if it was just in the neighborhoods, you certainly wouldn't be able to tell. It's really any town USA, and that's because it looks so similar. Like most of the stuff that we have built since World War II is exactly the same throughout the country. There may be some variation, like there tends to be clay rooftops and adobe in the Southwest. There tends to be more wood and vinyl siding and brick in the northern climates. Other than that, there's no real differentiation. It's all these commoditized ideas of individuality. Buy this car and you'll stand out with all the other people that have your same car. Buy these these pieces of clothing so you can stand out and express yourself, even though it's going to be worn by all the people that are in your same economic class. It's really funny that leftist ideas or leftist societies are all conceived of as being so horribly bland, when the opposite is really the truth. And getting to the point where everyone could actually have you know enough support so they could choose what they do with their life is by itself going to give people a lot more individuality. Yeah, having real choice in your life is what allows individuality to be expressed. And right now, most workers don't have that, but under a leftist system, they could.
And is continuously at work to stifle every symptom of nonconformity and independent attitude, unorthodox opinion. The whole weight of social condemnation comes down upon the head of the man or woman who dares defy conventional codes. Ruthless vengeance is wreaked upon the protester who refuses to follow the beaten track, or upon the heretic who disbelieves in the accepted formulas. In science and art, in literature, in poetry, and painting, this spirit compels adaptation and adjustment, resulting in imitation of the established and approved, in uniformity and sameness, in stereotyped expression. But more terribly still is punished nonconformity in actual life, our everyday relationships and behavior. The painter and writer may occasionally be forgiven the defiance of custom and precedent because, after all, their rebellion is limited to paper or canvas. It affects only a comparatively small circle. They may be disregarded or labeled as cranks who can do little harm. But not so with the man of action, who carries a challenge of accepted standards into social life.
It's kind of funny, though, too, that when you have reactionary movements that tend to burn art, or art in the very broadest sense, so that would include literature as well. They tend to burn books first and foremost. So it's those who express themselves through the written word that are seen as most threatening to whatever order the right wing is trying to establish or reestablish in their own minds. It's not as much the paintings, the sculpture, although that does get destroyed too. Maybe it's just because books tend to be more ubiquitous than works of art, especially in olden days, I suppose, before things could be readily reproduced all that well. That's probably it. Come to think of it, just that books are easier to amass a lot of and set on fire rather than paintings or whatever. Because I think a lot of paintings were destroyed, especially like modern art stuff was destroyed during World War II by the Axis powers, because they viewed modern art as decadent and or degenerate. That probably is the word they would use most, because that's what right wingers love, is that word degenerate, because It's one of those ones where you can really easily dehumanize whoever you're talking about just by describing them as degenerate, which is the reason I never use it myself to describe anyone, even ironically. I know a lot of leftists feel differently about that, but I just think it needs to be one of those ones that we don't try and claim, even ironically, and certainly don't try to rehabilitate, because I think there's no good use for that word. It only creates an us and them sort of thing that is beyond just one group of people versus another. It's one group of people versus subhumans at that point. And I think that's always a bad road to go down, no matter who it is you're talking about. All right, well, let's continue on.
Not harmless he. He is dangerous by power of example, by his very presence. His infraction of social canons can neither be ignored nor forgiven. He will be denounced as an enemy of society. It is for this reason that revolutionary feeling or thought, expressed in exotic poetry or masked in highbrow philosophic dissertations, may be condoned, may pass the unofficial or official censor, because it is neither accessible to nor understood by the public at large. But give voice to the same dissenting attitude in a popular manner, and you will immediately face the frothing denunciation of all the forces that stand for the preservation of the establishment. More vicious and deadening is compulsory compliance than the most virulent poison. Throughout the ages, it has been the greatest impediment to man's advance, hedging him in with 1,000 prohibitions and taboos, weighing his mind and heart down with outlived canons and codes, thwarting his will with imperatives of thought and feeling, with thou shalt and thou shalt not, of behavior and action. Life, the art of living, has become a dull formula, flat and inert. Yet so strong is the innate diversity of man's nature that centuries of this stultification have not succeeded in entirely eradicating his originality and uniqueness. True, the great majority have fallen into ruts, so deepened by countless feet that they cannot get back into the broad spaces.
Oh, and isn't that still just the truth today? Think about the most popular sorts of media in whatever medium. Well, let's just take television right now. What's the most popular form of TV? It's very low commitment reality type stuff. Real Housewives, Kardashians. I guess I don't follow a lot of it myself, but I know a lot of people that do, and I'm not denigrating you liking whatever sort of TV you like, but I am saying that there's a reason that these sorts of of artistic expressions are the ones that are consumed the most, and it's not just because it's not because people are dumb in any way. I assert that instead it is because daily life grinds people down so much, whether they have an office job or they work in a factory or they do something physical, they're a farmer, whatever it is that you do, as long as you are a worker, work grinds you down a lot, mentally and physically. And again, that's no matter what you do. It takes a lot of physical exertion to concentrate on a computer screen for however many hours a day. And it takes a lot of mental effort, like in my job, just doing package delivery. It takes a lot of mental effort to stay focused and alert and always be aware of any sort of danger around where I'm driving. It's not just, no job is just physical, no job is just mental. It's always a combination. And the amount that people work on average, it's the 40-hour work week, that takes so much out of you. And then you add on commute time, you add on just the time that it gets the time that it takes you to get ready in the morning or to unwind after work. And that takes an even bigger chunk of your day, even if you're only technically working an 8-hour shift. And I think consequently, there's just not much left in the tank by the time you get home. You're physically exhausted, you're mentally exhausted. And so about all you have mental bandwidth, physical bandwidth to engage with are low commitment shows, sitcoms, reality TV, stuff that you can pick up any old episode of, and it's not as though you have to have seen the entire 12 seasons of it to understand what's going on in this episode. Stuff you can just get right into, get out of, and then just kind of get on with your life. I'd say that is a symptom of the amount of work and the type of work that we subject ourselves to on a daily basis. And it becomes especially so when we're working jobs that we don't like, that we don't feel that we're making much of a difference in the world in. If we're just there simply to collect a paycheck and go home, because we get nothing else out of it, these sorts of things really grind people down. So I think that is why these sorts of artistic forms are the ones that are most consumed. Okay, let's get back into it.
But some do break away from the beaten track and find an open road where new vistas of beauty and inspiration beckon the heart and spirit. These the world condemns, but little by little it follows their example and lead, and finally comes up abreast of them.
And that still is the case today. You see artists, singers, painters, whatever it may be, that go outside of the norm, that break boundaries and stuff like that. And a lot of the time they're condemned as, again, degenerate or, what even is that art that you're making? I don't understand it. So it's probably not even art. You're just trying to fool us into believing that the things that you do are actually art, when in fact they're just garbage. You have people that trying to think of other good examples, but basically people that don't conform tend to be looked at as troublemakers, as weirdos, as people that aren't worth consideration. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that thought, but let's continue on.
In the meantime, those pathfinders have gone much further, and then we build monuments to them, and glorify the men we have vilified and crucified as we go on crucifying their brothers in spirit and the pioneers of our own day. Beneath this spirit of intolerance and persecution is the habit of authority, coercion to conform to the dominant standards, compulsion, moral and legal, to be and act as others, according to precedent and rule. But the general view that conformity is a natural trait is entirely false. On the contrary, given the least chance, unimpeded by mental habits instilled from the very cradle, man evidences uniqueness and originality. Observe children, for instance, and you will see the most varied differentiation in manner and attitude, in mental and psychic expression.
Oh shoot, I had a thought, but it's fleeting right now. So there's this idea under capitalism that it produces the most amount of ideas. Look at all the wonderful technology and advancement in culture and what have you that humans have produced because of capitalism. I would say the opposite is true. It's look at all that we've done, look at all that we've created, look at how far we've advanced technologically, socially in certain realms. in spite of living under a capitalist system. Because as Berkman was just pointing out, these capitalist systems tend to break people down. And it's not unique to capitalism by any means. Same thing would be even more so under feudalism, and more so again under a slave economy. So let's not pretend that it's unique to capitalism, but it is still a component of capitalism. And so it's actually kind of a wonder that anything advances at all in any respect, because there's such a price to pay for nonconformity. And how can you ever find a better idea if you just accept the world as it is and never question or challenge or experiment with anything different? You can't. That's the thing. Any of the great inventions of the past, 100, 200 years, take the classic example being the light bulb. Edison did not go with his first design. It was hundreds of iterations, different types of filaments that he used, until he landed upon, I think the incandescent bulb, I want to say, was the one that he ended up creating. But anyway, the filament that he used that finally became mass producible was only his last invention. But now imagine that Edison had not been born where he was, or had the opportunities that he did, if he instead was born to a poor family who for generations had worked in factories and on farms and doing basic labor. He would not have had the ability to do any of those experimentations. And had he tried to, he would have been, forcibly put back in line for wasting valuable resources of his family, or his, whether that's the family that he's growing up with, or the family that he has, like his wife and kids or whatever. If there was no opportunity for experimentation whatsoever, the world would have been much more impoverished. It would have taken, it could have taken an extra generation or two before someone else who was in the right position was able to invent the light bulb that was mass producible. So now think of all the people that are in that situation right now. All the people now that are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, just to survive, just to get by. People that have to move constantly because eventually they end up not being able to afford rent, or something happens and they can't afford rent. People that die prematurely because they can't afford medication. How many of those people could be an Edison, an Einstein, an Elon Musk, if not that he ever invented a thing on his own, but that's beside the point. How many of these people that propel technological advancement forward could have just been completely overlooked and would have never developed the things that they did, had it not been for their being in a position to be able to do so? And how many people now could be in a position to contribute wonderful things that we have not thought of at all, but are held back by baseline survival? So that's another way that an anarchist system would, unleash the full flower of what innovation and ideas, people are capable of. It would take many, 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 many more of those risks, take many, many, many more experimentation, or people experimenting, and there'd be a lot more chances for good ideas to come forward culturally, technologically, philosophically, whatever realm of thought or expression or knowledge you can think of. If everyone is freed up to experiment and fail a lot, you still are rolling the dice enough times that more good stuff is likely to come forward. And then you add on top of that things like patent laws and other sort of anti-innovation, not techniques, but habits that capitalists tend to cultivate for one reason or another. And yeah, doing away with that sort of thing, allowing all knowledge to be opened up for everybody. Twitch alone. Think of how amazing Twitch would be if you never had to worry about copyright strikes. If you could just, use music and remix it and combine it with other things and come up with songs that otherwise you might be worried would be too close to a copyright. But if there's no copyright to infringe on, then you're free to experiment with the entire wealth of music that's out there. There would be so many more ideas coming through on just a simple platform like Twitch, and just in that one realm of music, but it would apply to all realms. Think of how much technology could be advanced if code was all open source, free to use for everybody. If all these companies didn't have a profit motive, which the profit motive always goes along with a motive to make things proprietary, to keep people away from any sort of knowledge that could be used against you to compete and then outcompete you as a company. If that no longer is the case, if we're doing away with the profit motive, there's a whole lot more that we could all do working together with the vast amount of knowledge that is locked behind paywalls, on secured servers, all over the place. So that alone seems like a pretty good selling point for any leftist sort of philosophy that does away with these artificial barriers to progress and including the barriers that hold people back individually.
You will discover an instinctive tendency to individuality and independence, to nonconformity manifested in open and secret defiance of the will imposed from the outside, in rebellion against the authority of parent and teacher. The whole training and education of the child is a continuous process of stifling and crushing this tendency, the eradication of his distinctive characteristics, of his unlikeness of others, of his personality and originality. Yet in spite of year-long repression, suppression, and molding, some originality persists in the child when it reaches maturity, which shows how deep the springs of individuality are. Take any two persons, for example, who have witnessed some great tragedy, a big fire, let us say, at the same time and place. Each will tell the story in a different manner. Each will be original in his way of relating it and in the impression that he will produce, because of his naturally different psychology. But talk to the same two persons on some fundamental social matter, about life and government, for instance, and immediately you will hear expressed an exactly similar attitude, the accepted view, the dominant mentality.
Mm. Mm. I'm just thinking about all of meme culture at this point. Just infinite iterations of the same few jokes again and again and again. But that's definitely true about political discourse. It's been funny to watch I guess funny is not a perfect word for it, but it's been interesting to watch the discourse around the Russia and Ukraine, or the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In that conservatives don't seem to know how they're supposed to take it. And so, like, Trump himself at CPAC was railing against Putin, saying basically, who does he think he is invading another country like that, and how he wouldn't have done that under my watch and stuff like that. But then a lot a lot of the attendees at CPAC were booing him for that because they like Putin, because they worship very strong and dominant leadership sort of characteristics. So it's funny to see people not knowing which side they're supposed to take. It's also funny and tragic to see various leftist groups draw lines behind one imperial power or another, and none of them seem, well, very few. It is definitely the more odd position to find someone who is against both sides, who can say that for sure there's no justification of Putin invading another nation, starting a war, killing lots of innocent people. At the same time, it's not a great look to be backing a multinational imperialist organization like NATO, and thinking that somehow through them funneling arms into the country that's going to be a better outcome for people. That's not just going to lead to more war and destruction and a prolonged conflict, which again, war always hurts the working class, the most vulnerable, the most. And adding armaments to the situation is not only probably not going to be the difference between Putin deciding to go back home or not, but also that money could be going to directly helping the people that are in need right now, trying to get out of the country. And I think a lot of leftists lose focus on that our eyes should always be turned most often and most broadly towards the people that are the most vulnerable. So in this conflict, people that are most vulnerable is not the Ukrainian army. It is the regular civilians who haven't been able to leave, or who are actively trying to leave and are getting caught in the crossfire in the process. But either way, it seems to me that these are the people that we should be giving the most consideration to and keeping our eyes on. But just as Bergman says, a lot of virtually any political issue comes down to one side or another. So it's a very strange place to be. That even among the left, I find myself not on any of the major sides. Kind of disheartening, actually. But anyway, let's move on in the book.
Why? Because where man is left free to think and feel for himself, unhindered by precept and rule, and not restrained by fear of being different and unorthodox, with the unpleasant consequences it involves, he will be independent and free. But the moment the conversation touches on matters within the sphere of our social imperatives, one is in the clutches of taboos and becomes a copy and a parrot. Life in freedom and anarchy will do more than liberate man merely from his present political and economic bondage. That will be only the first step, the preliminary to a truly human existence. Far greater and more significant will be the results of such liberty, its effect upon man's mind, upon his personality. The abolition of the coercive external will, and with it the fear of authority, will loosen the bonds of men's moral compulsion, no less than of economic and physical. Man's spirit will breathe freely, and that mental emancipation will be the birth of a new culture, of a new humanity. Imperatives and taboos will disappear, and man will begin to be himself, to develop and express his individual tendencies and uniqueness. Instead of "thou shalt not," the public conscience will say thou mayest, taking full responsibility. That will be the training in human dignity and self-reliance, beginning at home and in school, which will produce a new race with a new attitude on life. The man of the coming day will see and feel existence on an entirely different plane. Living to him will be an art and a joy. He will cease to consider it as a race where everyone must try to be as good a runner as the fastest. He will regard leisure as more important than work, and work will fall into its proper subordinate place as a means to leisure, to enjoyment of life. Life will mean striving for finer cultural values, the penetration of nature's mysteries, the attainment of higher truth, free to exercise the limitless possibilities of his mind, to pursue his love of knowledge, to apply his inventive genius, to create and to soar on the wings of imagination. Man will reach his full stature and become man indeed. He will grow and develop according to his nature. He will scorn uniformity, and human diversity will give him increased interest in and more satisfying sense of the richness of being. Life to him will not consist in functioning, but living, and he will attain the greatest kind of freedom man is capable of, freedom and joy. That day lies far in the future, you say.
There's a quote that I wanted to share with y'all. Pulling it up right now. 1 second. Ugh. It's a Pinterest. Let me find a different one. Those dogs. All right. Let's share this tab instead. See if it's come up there. Okay. The quote is, I am somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. Stephen Jay Gould. And that basically speaks to what Berkman was talking about right there. That if we free up all these people to pursue whatever they feel like, then how many Einsteins will we suddenly discover? How many Picassos or Beethovens, or name a field and a great artist or thinker of any type, by allowing people to have real choice in their lives, by not making existence contingent upon producing for other people, namely the owner class, by just giving people the things that they need, regardless of if you think they need it or deserve it or not. How many people can we free up by doing so? And I'll share the tab back. I like that quote a lot. It kind of gets to, it definitely gets to what Berkman is talking about. Unleashing human potential just by stopping the constant need for the rat race.
How shall we bring it about? Far in the future, maybe, yet perhaps not so far one cannot tell. At any rate, we should always hold our ultimate object in view, if we are to remain on the right road. The change I have described will not come overnight. Nothing ever does. It will be a gradual development, as everything in nature and social life is, but a logical, necessary, and I dare say, inevitable development. Inevitable because the whole trend of man's growth has been in that direction, even if in zigzags, often losing its way, yet always returning to the right path. How then might it be brought about?
Oh, okay.
This has been a production of
Well,
Audible
that was
Anarchist.
the end of that
You can find more
chapter.
Audible Anarchist on YouTube.
Everyone wave at Amanda as she comes on screen here. Oh, you're on the screen. It's too late. You are part of this stream, whether you like
This
it or
audio
not.
production was made in collaboration with Audible.
All right, let's see how. Oh, this is only a 6-minute chapter. We can cover that. So we will move on to non-communist anarchism. So he's going to talk about other flavors and varieties of anarchism now. I don't know why it keeps dumping my closed captioning every time it goes to a new chapter. That's really annoying. Yeah, that's a strong ending there. Appealing to what humanity could be if we stopped dominating one another and allowing all the fruits of labor to accumulate at the top. That's basically what we're talking about here. Just opening up choice and possibility to as many people as possible. All right. So this one is non-communist anarchism. We'll do this chapter. This is a real short one. Let's see what the one after that. 14 minutes. May get to it, may not. We'll see. Why are we not scrolling up again? There we go. All right.
Anarchist.
Chapter 23 Non-Communist Anarchists. Before we proceed, let me make a short explanation. I owe it to those anarchists who are not communists. Because you should know that not all anarchists are communists. Not all of them believe that communism, social ownership, and sharing according to need would be the best and most just economic arrangement. I have first explained to you communist anarchism, because it is, in my opinion, the most desirable and practical form of society. The communist anarchists hold that only under communist conditions would anarchy prosper, and equal liberty, justice, and well-being would be assured to everyone without discrimination. But there are anarchists who do not believe in communism. They can be generally classified as individualists and mutualists. All anarchists.
That's so funny. For the first half of this book, I just assumed that Berkman himself was an individualist. But after those last few chapters, I think I can see that I was wrong in that regard. He definitely does believe in the collective side of anarchy, which I like. I've very much enjoyed these last few chapters. They've been my favorite so far of the things that he said. I was thinking this book was actually going to be a slog after the first few chapters, that I was going to end up just butting heads with Berkman again and again and again. But perhaps I missed something in the way that he was laying things out in those early chapters, because it did seem a lot like he was going towards an individualist perspective. But here we have him disavowing that, and those last few chapters where he was really getting into the heart of his theory did also point more towards a collectivist notion of action and conceiving of society. Everyone working together, not just people living their own version of anarchism.
Anarchists agree on this fundamental position, that government means injustice and oppression, that it is invasive, enslaving, and the greatest hindrance to man's development and growth. They believe that freedom can only exist in a society where there is no compulsion of any kind. All anarchists are therefore at one with the basic principle of abolishing government.
Let's see. It really depends on how you define government. If it is the state, if getting to a nation state is what we're talking about, then yeah, maybe we can get by without that. But any form of government, I don't think so. You still are going to have people that need to work out rules of getting along with one another. You're going to have legal systems to deal with people that don't follow the rules, and you have to be able to enforce that somehow So even if it's very small, on the very small scale, even if it's down to a neighborhood or a village, um, or a family or a business, you're still going to have some set of rules that well, everyone may have a say in, an equal say, in fact. Everyone may also be a part of the government, but that doesn't mean there is no government. And I cannot conceive of a society that just does away with government entirely and there literally is no rules and just hope that people get along and work everything out just as they do. I mm, I don't think that's going to be a practical way of doing things, especially if you want things that require a lot of complexity. Like, well, the example came up recently of producing um, pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals take a very complex supply line that has to be, I mean, it has to be tightly regulated if we're doing any sort of exchange, which for the foreseeable future, we're going to have some sort of a market system. It would seem, even if we get into the realm of socialism or even start dipping our toes into anarchy or communism, uh, you probably have to have some sort of exchange market. And if you have an exchange market, you have to have someone regulating it because there are then incentives to swindle people, and some people are going to take advantage of that. It's just how it happens. It's not necessarily anything malicious. It's just more a factor of, yeah, if we can get away with adding a little bit of sawdust to this flour, and then maybe we could get a little bit more, and it's not really hurting anybody, or at least not that we know of. Um, so let's just keep adding some sawdust, and we'll get more in return with less, you know, expensive and hard to produce raw materials. We can dump our waste in a local waterway. Like, it's just a little bit. We're not, no one could say that we ever produce enough waste to uh, hurt everybody or even a single person. The water will disperse it. It's just us. But then you have another operation that does the same thing, another and another and another, and then all those small, um, either point source or non-point source, and that's not really worth defining what each of those is necessarily, but the sources of pollution add up. That's the important part. You have a lot of people doing a little bit of pollution, and all of a sudden, no one person is responsible, but overall, there's a lot of pollution or a lot of contamination of drinking water or water that people need for one reason or another. You have a lot of terrible negative ecological consequences, even if everyone is getting an equal say in the way that things are produced. It would seem then that you would need some sort of regulation just to make sure that everyone is doing things with the highest standard feasible and not swindling one another or dumping the worst parts of what they do on other people. Um, it seems like you have to have some sort of regulation. If you have to have regulation, you have to have a regulating body. So when it comes to very complex things like making pharmaceuticals, you need to know that the ingredients that you're getting have not been contaminated. You have to have some sort of a standard for, um, purity or uh, some sort of a standard that will tell you that what you're getting is what you think you're getting. Otherwise, people's lives could be ruined. Um, so again, to conceive of an entire nation of people operating outside of any sort of a nation state, at least I don't know I don't know what that would look like. It's hard for me to conceive of something like that. And it's hard for me to conceive of never needing regulation. Um, certainly while we still have any sort of a market system and any sort of an incentive to cut corners, someone's going to end up cutting that corner. And then there could be a lot of catastrophic consequences to that. I mean, just imagine if if you had people producing things that didn't believe in germs. And as strange of a statement as that might have sounded, even 20, 30 years ago, there's a significant amount of people today, thanks to strange internet conspiracies, that don't believe that germs cause sickness. There's a lot of very strange beliefs that people sincerely hold. And if those people are ever responsible for, something that could infect people if handled improperly, it could infect a lot of people, and there'd be no recourse if we don't have any sort of a regulatory system in place. And even just on a city level, imagine you have a city upriver from a bunch of other cities. Even if everything is fine for your citizens, you make sure that your water is pure and drinkable and all that sort of thing. There still is somewhat of an incentive to dump any harmful pollutants into the river just downstream of your city. Then let everyone else deal with it, or it'll be dispersed by the time it gets to them. So it doesn't really matter. There is an incentive to, again, cut, even if it's not malicious, even if it's just cutting corners, or doing what's most practical without any sort of regulation on that, or even with regulation that only applies to then your local municipality. There still could be abuse of people further downstream, like literally downstream in this case. So I'm not sure if I can go there with Berkman in agreeing that anarchism means absolutely no government. Maybe the state, but I don't think government broadly defined. If we're defining government as just a shared set of agreed upon rules of interacting with one another based on our core principles of giving as much freedom, democracy, choice, bodily autonomy to as many people as possible without to the point of without diminishing anyone else's ability to do the same, including people that are not within our own jurisdiction, then I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Let's continue on. Maybe I'll get it back.
They disagree mostly on the following points. First, the manner in which...
Oh. So we're defining government. So, yeah. If we can, even if we were just agreeing that we want to give as much freedom, democracy, choice, bodily autonomy, and so forth to as many people as possible without diminishing anyone else's ability to do the same, then I still would define just that basic agreement as a type of government. It may be very rudimentary. It may be unofficial in that everyone is volunteering to or voluntarily opting into it. But at the same time, you couldn't really have people living in a place with everyone else but not agreeing to their rules. So it still, to me, seems like you're going to need some semblance of government, even if it's very horizontally structured. Even if everyone in the community is also part of the government, it still is government. So I just don't see getting around that. Maybe he's only got 4 minutes to go, a little over 4.5 minutes to go. to describe this, so maybe he'll get into that. But I'm just not seeing it yet.
Anarchy will come about. The communist anarchists say that only a social revolution can abolish government and establish anarchy, while individualist anarchists and mutualists do not believe in revolution. They think that present society will gradually develop out of a government into a non-governmental condition. Second, individualist anarchists and mutualists believe in individual ownership, as against communist anarchists, who see the institution of private property as one of the main sources of injustice and inequality, of poverty and misery. The individualists and mutualists maintain that liberty means the right of everyone to the product of his toil, which is true, of course. Liberty does mean that. But the question is not whether one has a right to his product, but whether there is such a thing as an individual product. As I have pointed out in preceding chapters, there is no such thing in modern industry. All labor and all products of labor are social. The argument, therefore, about the right of the individual to his product has no practical merit. I have also shown that the exchange of products or commodities cannot be individual or private unless the profit system is employed. Since the value of a commodity cannot be adequately determined, no barter is equitable. This fact leads, in my opinion, to social ownership and use, that is, to communism, as the most practical and just economic system. But, as stated, individual anarchists and mutualists disagree with communist anarchists on this point. They assert that the source of economic inequality is monopoly, and they argue that monopoly will disappear with the abolition of government because it is a special privilege given and protected by the government, which makes monopoly possible. Free competition, they claim, would do away with monopoly and its evils. Individualist anarchists, followers of Stirner and Tucker, as well as Tolstoyan anarchists who believe in non-resistance, have no very clear plan of the economic life under anarchy. The mutualists, on the other hand, propose a definite new economic system. They believe, with their teacher, the French philosopher Proudhon, that mutual banking and credit without interest would be the best economic form in a non-government society. According to their theory, free credit, affording everyone the opportunity to borrow money without interest, would tend to equalize incomes and reduce profits to a minimum, and would thus eliminate riches as well as poverty. Free credit and competition in the open market, they say, would result in economic equality, while the abolition of government would secure individual freedom. The social life of the mutualist community, as well as the individualist society, would be based on the sanctity of voluntary agreement of free contract. I have given here but the briefest outlines of the attitude of individualist anarchists and mutualists. It is not the purpose of this work to treat in detail those anarchists' ideas which the author thinks are erroneous and impractical. Being a communist anarchist, I am interested in submitting to the reader those views that I consider the best and soundest. I thought it fair, however, not to leave you in ignorance about the existence of other non-communist anarchist theories. For a closer acquaintance to them, I refer you to the appended list of books on anarchism in general.
This has been a production of Audible Anarchist. You can
I still have trouble understanding a lot of the mutualist arguments or conceptions of how they would like to have the world. So a free system of credit. So basically, if you want to start a business, anyone can do it. They just, you have a central community bank, and everyone contributes to it in some way or another. And then they just give out credit to anyone that wants to start an enterprise. And then there's some amount of there's some form of a market still, and the idea is that good ideas win out, which I just right off the bat there, the idea that somehow the market chooses the best ideas, just as a matter of course, I don't think is true. We've gone through those examples before plenty of times where superior technology has not meant for, or is not made for, a winning brand. A lot of times marketing ends up winning out or buying out competition. I don't know. And it just seems very small scale. And maybe that's how they want it. Maybe they don't want any sort of large scale communities or cities or anything like that. I don't know. I've only read one book by Proudhon. It was pretty good. It was What is Property? And he makes a really good case for why all property is basically theft. If you go back far enough, enough transactions back, enough generations back, someone killed or swindled somebody out of the property out of any given piece of property. So to have any legitimate claim to it for all of eternity or whatever, or even the present, is ridiculous. Just not the case. All right, get rid of that for now. I don't think we will go into the next one yet. This next one is why revolution. So Bergman was saying that the difference that he sees between anarcho-communists and individualist forms of anarchy is that he believes in a social revolution. And he said a social revolution. He didn't necessarily say a physical revolution, just that I guess you probably couldn't have one without the other, though. But it's just an interesting way that he conceived of it, because that was not entirely clear why he presented it as a social revolution instead of a violent overthrow of the current order. But I mean, Kropotkin believed in the same thing. He believed that there needed to be a physical revolution, and that the revolution was ongoing, and the way that you fulfilled the revolution, or to fulfill the revolution, was to fulfill the promises of the revolution. So you promise everyone that they're going to be on an equal playing field, and that everyone will have access to all of the goods and services needed for a comfortable and good existence. If those are the things that you promise people, then that's what you had to do in order to fulfill the revolution. So it was just ongoing, and that in doing so, you would invest in everybody the desire to, not ever have a rollback of the revolution. So not accept any sort of overthrow from former capitalists who want to reassert their dominance, or from invading armies who want to take advantage of what they would see as a political power vacuum. And that just naturally, by freeing people, they would want to take up arms against anyone who would threaten that. Oh, and thanks for the follow, Herman Berger. Glad to have you tonight. So yeah, interesting. Anyway, so the way that I would define anarcho-communism as differentiated from more individualist forms is that I would see it as trying to achieve the same things that communism is, at least as conceived in books like State and Revolution. So wanting to have a similar system, just from the other end of things. So instead of toppling the order from the top and then imposing communism from above, you would instead be building dual power at the bottom levels, and then eventually supplanting the local power structure and confederating with then other, you know, um, other jurisdictions, we'll just say it that way, who chose to coordinate with you. And so eventually you could have a system that goes all the way to a federal coordinating level. It's just that every component below it would be in more and more control until you get to the local level. Local levels, we have the most control over things. And if you're getting to the point of having representatives to help coordinate things, then just as in Lenin's conception of communism, they would be recallable at any point, and they would only get a workman's wages if we're going to have any sort of monetary system, which I think we would still need to have for quite some time here. It's it's very hard to find people that are even ready intellectually to live in a society that's not at all controlled by money. So I think it's probably going to take a long time to get beyond that concept. But for now, the people that would be representatives would not be given some exorbitant salary, and there might be other controls on them to limit their power as well. The idea being that you don't want people in those positions just to, do like what Nancy Pelosi does, use their power to amass fortunes to then create hierarchy again. You don't want that to happen. So different in the anarcho-communist system would be that the representatives would only be supposed to be representing the will of the people that sent them there. Hey, Nathan, how you doing tonight? We just got done with a couple chapters there on what is communist anarchism. I'm just going over some thoughts that I had. So yeah, so anarcho-communist system, you might still have representatives that you send out to represent you in it could be a federation of neighborhoods that then come together on a citywide level, and then from that point it could be all the same levels of government up from there. You could have you could still have county government or regional government, state government, all the way up to a federal government. It's just each of these components would mutually agree to confederate and coordinate with one another, and then also each representative to each level. Yeah, uh, each representative at each level, not only would they be recallable, but their only job would be to represent the will of the people that sent them there. So it'd be an actual representative form. Yeah. So yeah, the people would, and it's just a factor of you can't have a nation of millions all getting together in a general assembly, even with modern day technology and voting on anything. I mean, there wouldn't be enough time for everyone to speak, right? So both communism and anarchism, in this case anarcho-communism, recognize that if we're going to use a representative form of democracy, then it's because it's just more practical than getting everyone together at any level, really. Could you imagine going to a city hall meeting where an entire city turned out? Even my city of 280,000 people, even if all the adults turned out, that's close to 100,000 people trying to pack themselves into city hall. That would be completely impractical. But we can come close to that by having representatives. and we can have more direct power by having those representatives just representing our will. So each district then in the city then polls their constituency about any matter at hand, and the people then tell them how to vote. Yeah, and there, I think it's okay to have leaders in some respect, as long as they're not hoarding power and they're not entrenching themselves into power positions forever. And there's different mechanisms one could employ to make sure that people um, don't get entrenched into power positions. You know, limiting terms, um, not or doing things by lot or by lottery. So your number comes up and hey, you get to be a representative for your neighborhood or whatever. And that gets away from power seekers, basically. That tries to disempower them as much as possible in the system. Because when you have people that are power seekers tend to be seeking power so they can amass wealth and influence over other people. And that's the opposite of what we want in this system. We don't want concentrations of power. Yeah. So interesting to hear how Berkman is conceiving of anarcho-communism as differentiated from individualist communist or anarchist groups. But like I said earlier, I've only read one book by Proudhon, and he's the main godfather of mutualism. So I don't understand entirely all of his concepts of how he thinks that his system could work. But as from what I do understand, it seems as though he wanted more. He wanted to make it so everyone was given the entire product of their labor. He didn't care so much if they were bosses or owners or anything like that, as long as people were being completely 100% compensated for what they put into the business, minus expenses. Of course, he thought that was still fair. So that was his way of doing away with private property. He would just make it so that there was no advantage to being an owner. Like you would still only get compensated based on what you were putting into the company. And I mean, just on its face, I see some problems with that. It seems like it could be a really easily manipulated system. I mean, you think how little any of us know about um, how much we contribute or how much money we are bringing into any of our companies. We can guess, like I've seen it before when I was working landscaping over one of these summers here. I saw that for the bid sheet for the job that I was working on, they had a spot for my labor, and it just happened to be double what they were paying me. And they had all the expenses for a bunch of different stuff. So just for my own labor, I know that the company was making twice as much. And some of it probably was going to support staff. Like we had a front desk lady, we had HR, who was one person who came in one day a week. There was some advertising. There was an advertising department. There was a design department. So probably some of what my my labor was going to was to support them as well, which is fair. But I'm sure quite a large chunk of that was just siphoned off to the owners and the upper management um, for no other reason than they could. They were in a position to do so. Yeah, and it is important to distinguish private property and personal property. Personal property, it's usually said, is your toothbrush. It's things that you personally need to get through your life. Your personal food, your personal vehicle would even be your personal property. Private property is any sort of machinery or tools or land that you need to make money, to have an enterprise, a business enterprise. That's private property. So yeah, an important distinction for sure. Yeah. So I think that'll do it for tonight. Actually, I think we're gonna just shut it down early because the next chapter is 14 minutes, and to get through it in 45, that's definitely pushing it. That's definitely pushing it. Let's see how many we have to go after this. So we just finished 23. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Only 8 chapters left. Pretty soon we'll be done. And I think the next time we'll be able to get through 2 chapters, no problem. And a couple chapters after that are a little bit longer, but then it gets into some shorter and medium length chapters to finish it out. So yeah, I'd bet another couple months we'll be wrapping this book up. But it could be sooner if I had more supporters on Patreon. Time for Elden Ring. Yeah, my computer has trouble streaming The Witcher 3, which came out 7 years ago now. So I don't think I'd even get through the load screen of Elden Ring at this point. My graphics card is just it's just not good enough. It's not up to the task. Yeah, you're welcome, Nathan. Let's see. Yeah, I know. I wish I could do Elden Ring, but hey, if I get more Patreons, I could do that too. Not to guilt anybody. If anyone is available, though, always appreciate the support on Patreon. I'd love to do this more often, make this, at least a part-time job. Oh, your PS4 is pushing it. Jet engine tears. So yeah, so that is the goal eventually, is to get this to be more than just more than just a hobby, something that I can actually devote serious time to, because I'm pretty much maxed out doing this 4 days a week. I can't really devote any more of my free time to this. So to move up to the next level and actually start going through books much more quickly and be able to do a lot more things in general, actually have time and space to research things, where I could actually be putting out more video content myself, it would need a cash infusion. And so thanks very much to the patrons that I have so far, Jon T and Mike E. Very much appreciated. Of course, anyone that cannot afford to be a patron, totally understandable. But if you could just share this stream wherever you're finding it with someone you know that you think might enjoy it, bring more people into it, expose more people to these ideas. I appreciate that, Nathan, for pushing my name out there. Do very much appreciate that. All right, I think that's going to do it then. I will see you all hopefully Friday morning. We'll be doing more Witcher stuff. And in the meantime, yeah, have a great night. Oh, I do want to plug, I always do this. One more thing to plug. So Bread Theory is part of the Leftist Creator Collective at Left Signal Boost TV. So if you just go to facebook.com/Left Signal Boost TV, all one word, you can find a really great page that now 5 streamers. We have just gotten our 5th streamer, or I guess he's more of a content creator than, he doesn't do many live streams. It is Dan Platt of the 3 Left Show, who's on this show quite often. My most often recurring guest, who actually will be on this Sunday to do more of his political organization handbook that he's found. We're going to go through that. But yeah, it's a great place to get live streams and content from all sorts of leftist creators. And proud to be a part of that collective. If you know anyone else who is producing any sort of leftist content. It could be painting, it could be poetry, it could be live streaming, video essays, whatever it is that they're creating. We want them to be a part of this too, and we'd be happy to have them, especially if they're a smaller creator. We just passed our 1,000th follower on the or 1,000th like, I should say. It's not followers on Facebook. Our 1,000th like we just passed. So especially for smaller creators who are just trying to build an audience, this can be a great opportunity to kind of get it to be a part of something where we can all share resources with one another and help get each other's name out there as much as possible. So check it out, facebook.com/left signal boost TV. Make sure to like so you get notified for all of the live streams and content that comes out. All right, now I do definitely need to get going. So I will see you all Friday. Thanks for joining.